There's still a job in hand that we must do. Cameras start to click, we know what create is something new. So go Marty and Sarah and Mark and Matt, Owen, Smitty, McCrilly and Jamie Lane in the Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. Stop the clock, we're done, we're rolling. Sound the horn and sing that we are going. 27 hours, that is the time. So let's hop on the bus and let it shine, 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 shine. Say sha la 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 la, 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 sha la 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 la. Good afternoon, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Folks, we've got a sort of a peculiar story for you today. You know, it's one of those ones where I feel as though the Bandido is not going to please everybody here. It's one of those divisive stories. Who are we talking about? Well, Jason Arday. You know this former professor at Cambridge? He used to be a professor, then he stepped down amid all of these allegations and scrutiny surrounding who he really is. Was he plagiarizing somebody else's work? I mean, were his athletic achievements all they were made out to be? Was there some questionable funding? A whole bunch of allegations were thrown in the direction of Jason Arday, this professor at Cambridge University. Now, it just so happened that he is or was, I should say, we're going to come to that in a second, he was the first supposed black professor at Cambridge in fuck knows how long. I don't know. But there was a big hullabaloo made of the fact that he was black and he was a professor. So anyway, he's now working at Cambridge. All these allegations then come out about his past and some of his claims and his PhD thesis. Because you know, folks, the old PhD thesis is extremely important. You wouldn't want to fuck that up now, would you? You wouldn't have wanted to, you know, be nicking a few bits and pieces from someone else. But folks, I mean, what is an original idea? Does anybody really have an original idea? But you know, look, anyway, a whole bunch of allegations were thrown in the direction of this historic first black professor of Cambridge University. So what happened? Well, Jason decided to step down from his role, or from his position as being a professor. Then the scrutiny continued. People then were thinking, well, are we going to get an investigation? We've got this professor who's supposed to be who he says he is, but there are some allegations. There's nothing, they're just accusations, folks. We've talked about this before. Allegations, accusations. So, perhaps it warrants an investigation. But then what happened? Well, Jason Arday, a few days ago, was found dead at his house. Now, the insinuation is that he killed himself amid all of the stress, the emotional strain that came with all of this public scrutiny. Now, the official cause of death, let me be clear, has not officially been released. So we don't know exactly how he died. But his friends, his family, his colleagues, and all of his supporters are strongly hinting that the emotional turmoil that he has been suffering over the last number of days and weeks since these allegations broke, what else are we supposed to infer? All these people are saying he was under tremendous emotional stress. Right, and he ends up dead in his house. So what are we supposed to think? So the whole thing is a bit of a mess. We've got allegations. Nothing is proven. No investigation has taken place. So they are simply accusations that have been made against this black professor. He then steps down, and then he ends up dead. Presumably, we have to presume, I'm just going to speculate. It's not set in stone, it's not fact, but judging what his friends, family, colleagues, and supporters have said, I have to assume they are hinting that he has killed himself amid all of this, all of these pending investigations and all of this public scrutiny. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about on the show today. And what did I say? You're not going to please everybody with this analysis. Because on one side, over here, on this side, you have, the people, the anti-racist parties, and, the people who say, but Jesus me, it's racism. All of this scrutiny into Jason Arday, this first black professor at Cambridge, if it was a white man, you wouldn't get the same scrutiny. So, you've got a whole bunch of people over here saying that this was, outright racism taking place in broad daylight. It was a witch hunt by the media, institutional murder. This is some of the stuff I'm hearing. So you've got those folk over here who are saying that it's clearly an attack on black people. It's an attack not just on black people, but black people in positions of authority and, recognized positions of, high status in the world. So you have those people over here saying that it's just racism in broad daylight, attacking this black man, this black professor. Okay. Then you've got the people over here saying, diversity politics. So you've got people saying the only reason that Jason Arday even got into this position in Cambridge is because he's black. There was a blind eye turn to some of his dubious past history, and he was allowed to become a professor in the interest of being diverse. We've heard plenty of this before, folks. So you have the crowd over here saying that. They're laying into the fact that, no, it's just this typical woke nonsense. Okay. Then in the middle, we have a bunch of people saying, well, okay, I don't belong to the left, I don't belong to the right. I'm just here in the middle, and, well, how about we just acknowledge the fact that we have a bunch of allegations? Folks, what the fuck is an allegation? An allegation is someone's opinion as to what has happened with regards to a specific circumstance. Doesn't mean it's true, it goes without saying. Fuck me. So an allegation is what it is. It's not evidence of guilt. It's not evidence that the person has been convicted of whatever it is they're being accused of. It's nothing of the sort. It's just someone's point of view, someone's opinion. So you've got the people in the middle here who are then saying, well, all we're dealing with are allegations, and so as a result, we should have an investigation. Have an investigation, and let's see what comes out of the investigation. And then we can analyze the quality of or we could say the rigor of the investigative process that Cambridge University is going to carry out. We can analyze the rigor of it, we can analyze some of the information that comes out of it, and then we can come to a more informed conclusion. Once we have at least some form of an investigation that cross-examines the allegations and then cross-examines the person, i.e. the accused. Well, but Jesus me, that's not really going to happen now, is it? Cambridge University saying, well, we don't feel like doing the investigation now because, of the unfortunate circumstances that have now evolved because Jason Arday is dead, presumably, through suicide. I don't know what else. I mean, the police said they're not treating it as suspicious. So, I mean, what else are we supposed to infer there? So Cambridge University now, they are looking like they're not going to run their investigation because of what has ultimately unfolded. And then that leaves a whole bunch of people saying, well, I mean, this guy could have been a fraud, but he might not have been a fraud. It's worth investigating. He's a professor at a very swanky university. I have to assume people pay a lot of money to go to these universities, these swanky ones, because a degree from a swanky university is going to make all the difference in your life, of course. So, in the interest of all of the customers of this university, you would like to think that, there would be some degree of a rigorous investigative process that's going to take place, because they are paying the university for their service. So if there are some, if there's some uncertainty with respect to some of their professors or some of their employees, well, you would like to think that that would be investigated. But now that looks like it's not going to happen. And so, in comes the Bandido. In comes the Bandido, folks, to clear it all up for all of you folk. Because, it doesn't look like Cambridge is going to clear it up. The left over here, the people on the left are, they're talking all of their, racism. They can see no further than racism. Over here on the right, they're talking about wokeness and diversity politics and all of this. See, you've got so many conflicting opinions on the story. I know what you're thinking. You need the Bandido to clear it all up for you. Don't worry. That's what the Bandido's here to do. But folks, what am I really here to do? Well, what I'm really here to do is extract a lesson from this. Because, is Jason Arday a fraud? I don't know. What I do know is anybody can make an allegation. So if I hear someone accusing Jason Arday of plagiarism or exaggerating claims about himself, I don't really know what to make of that beyond an opinion of some person. That person may have some hidden agenda as to why they are attacking Jason Arday that they aren't currently revealing to everybody. So, an allegation, really, is just a load of bollocks, to be quite honest with you. So I don't make much of that. But what is the lesson from all of this? There is a good lesson, folks. There's one that I want to get into here on the show. Because, it's easy to get swept up in all of the politics of this. What's the left saying? What's the right saying? What are the people in the middle saying? All of that stuff. And, we could approach it from that angle. But why the fuck would we do that? There are plenty of people doing that. So you can go listen to them if you want some in-depth, political slant from the left or the right. Plenty of those people out there. What we want to do here is actually learn something useful for ourselves so that we can benefit from the story. Because as I've said, I don't know if this dude is guilty or not of what he's being accused of. It doesn't look like there's going to be an investigation. We'll never really get to the bottom of it, probably. So why bother why bother investing a whole bunch of time here on a live show trying to speculate, was he a fraud or was he telling the truth? Don't care about that, really. But there's something else that I bet a whole bunch of people will overlook with respect to this story, but we're not going to overlook it here. But before we get into the lesson, folks, let us first find ourselves on firm ground. Because, I wouldn't want you to be proceeding throughout this show not understanding all of the facts as presented by the BBC. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go on to the BBC's website. We're going to read a little article that they did up with regards to all of this. We're going to get a brief summary here. I'm just using the AI, using Google's AI, just to give me a brief summary of what has happened, in case you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, which you may not. So we're going to do a little summary. We're then going to go to the BBC. We're going to see what the BBC's saying. Then we are going to come back onto our main screen here and extract a big juicy lesson from all of this. Okay, so first things first. Let us get our little summary up here. Now, that is not what I am looking for. That is the BBC article. Let us get the summary up first. This is what I'm looking for. This here bit. You should be able to see it up on screen. Okay. So, you can see what I've asked the AI. What have I asked the AI? I said, summarize the entire Jason Arday situation in 2 paragraphs, please. So let's read this so that we understand what we're dealing with. So it says, Professor Jason Arday, a British sociologist who made headlines in 2023 as the youngest black professor in the history of the University of Cambridge, tragically died in August 2026 at the age of 41, following an intense period of public controversy. The situation unfolded rapidly after a series of investigative media reports and online scrutiny accused Arday of substantial academic plagiarism with his doctoral thesis and journal publications. Additionally, critics raised deep doubts over elements of his inspiring personal backstory, which included claims of being unable to speak until the age of 11 or read until the age of 18. Yeah. Okay. Alongside highly ambitious athletic qualifications and charitable fundraising milestones. Although Arday fiercely denied intentional dishonesty and attributed formatting errors to his neurodivergence, that's one way to put it, Cambridge launched an official inquiry into his academic qualifications and misconduct. He resigned from his post on August the 5th, 2026, citing the immense personal toll of the public spotlight. Okay, so I think actually that's enough. That's enough of a background. Now, I have to say, let me just highlight this here. This absolute fucking pearl of a sentence here. So, look at this. What about this for use of the English language, folks? Although Arday fiercely denied intentional dishonesty and attributed formatting errors to his neurodivergence. Oh yes, the old excuses were prepared, folks. You see, this is the thing. I don't know if Jason Arday, as I've said, is guilty or not of what he's being accused. But let me tell you something that I am always suspicious of. I am always suspicious when someone has been caught making mistakes and they make a bunch of excuses for them. Neurodivergence. You're a fucking professor at Cambridge University. What do you mean neurodivergence? What does that even mean? Let's have a look. I mean, what does that even mean? Let's ask the AI. What does if I can even spell this, divergence mean? What does neurodivergence mean? So this is what old, Jason's saying here. The reason why, he didn't quite spot his errors. Neurodivergence refers to a brain that develops, functions, and processes information differently than what is considered typical. It is an umbrella term, meaning it is not a medical diagnosis or disease, but rather a concept that recognizes natural variations in human brain wiring. Well, holy fuck, folks. Isn't that convenient? So the excuse that is being made is not a disease, not a diagnosis, but a fucking concept that recognizes natural variations in human brain wiring. What does this even mean? How is this a legitimate excuse for the oversights that were made in some of his work? I mean, again, folks, I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not saying he's a fraud. But the fact that he has used neurodivergence, according to the AI anyway, as a reason for why, some of these errors were not picked up. If that is, in fact, what Jason Arday has said. Now, look, maybe the AI is reporting this incorrectly. Maybe the AI's summary is just making up stuff. But, if that is true, if that's the reason that's been given, oh, well, but Jesus, I've got a bit of the old neurodivergence there, which means a brain that develops, functions, and processes information differently than what is considered typical. If that's the reason that was given, I'm suspicious. That's a weird excuse to give. But anyway, maybe the AI is wrong. Maybe the AI is misreporting. But let's just say, for talk's sake, if that is what the excuse is, that's suspicious. So again, whether Jason Arday said that or not, if you ever, folks, here's a life hack for you in terms of deducing if someone's full of shit or not. If someone makes a mistake and they say to you, the reason, Mr. Bandido, that I made my mistake is because of my neurodivergence, my advice to you would be to look at that person with a highly raised eyebrow and to not trust them. So if you ever hear that as an excuse, neurodivergence, be on guard. Okay, now, you've got the gist of the backstory here. Now, here's the BBC's article. And here's the title. It says, calls for public inquiry into Jason Arday, quote, witch hunt. Now, folks, I do have to just say something here, because we do this all the time on the show. So this isn't me picking on anybody. We do this for everyone. I do it for myself. I do it for myself. I do it for others. So I'm just being a fair man, because that's exactly what the Bandido is. Now, let me just zoom in here on Jason Arday. Because, folks, we have a bit of a slogan here on the show that says you should always judge a book by its cover. That's one of our slogans that we have on the show. Because, people love to tell you, no, don't judge a book by its cover. You should never do that. You should always give people the benefit of the doubt, regardless of how they look. No, you should just give them the benefit of the doubt. If they're carrying, 13 razor blades in their belt pocket and they've got a chainsaw in their left hand and a fucking axe in their right. And they are riddled up and down with tattoos, and they have 27 piercings in their ears and their nose. No, you should not judge that book by the cover. You should give them the benefit of the doubt. And if there is blood or what looks like red liquid dripping from the chainsaw and from the razor blades, you should still not judge the book by its cover. You should give the person the benefit of the doubt. And you should say, "Hello, sir, can I use your chainsaw?" Obviously not, folks. That is not what you should do. You should absolutely judge a book by its cover. And we do this on the show all the time. So look, there's Jason. Now I have to say, folks, this story has been popping up on my feed for the last week or so, and I didn't pay any attention to it. I kept on saying Cambridge Professor, blah, blah, blah. And I flicked past the headline of the article. There was no image with the article, there was just a headline. It kept coming up. Eventually I thought, what the fuck is going on with all of this? So I went into the article, and this is the face that greeted me when I went into the article. Now, folks, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm not trying to be tactless. I know this gentleman is dead. And I know the whole set of circumstances surrounding his death, or we could say unfortunate. Absolutely. But I have to be honest. Judging the book by the cover, this dude looks odd. He really does. And I mean, what do I mean by he looks odd? Well, you see, if I were to take his stubble and his beard away, he looks like a woman. Now, I'm not saying he's a tranny. I'm just saying that he looks a bit strange to me. Now, you might say, well, Mr. Bandido, that's rich coming from you. You look strange too. Maybe I do. You're going to have to cast your own judgment on that. But all I can tell you is that using my own eyes, the first impression I got of this dude, whenever I opened the article, I thought to myself, holy fuck, that looks like a woman with stubble. That was my thought. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because you might think, oh, well, this has been very unfair. The man's dead. Why are you picking holes in his appearance? Well, we do have a question with this story. Now, it's not a question we're really going to get deep into here on the show, but there is a question, which is Jason Arday a fraud or not? I mean, did he plagiarize other people's work? Did he exaggerate claims about himself? Is he not exactly presenting himself fairly and accurately? I mean, that's a question. Those are questions that are on the table. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I don't know where this dude's, where we're gonna, let's just say, place him in terms of being guilty or not. I don't know all of the details surrounding Jason Arday's life, about his qualifications, about who he is. I don't know any of it. But you know what I can do? I can judge the book of a cover. That's what I can do. Because, the cover of someone's book can give you some very useful information about them. And let me tell you what the cover of Jason Arday's book tells me. I think he looks feminine to me. He has feminine features to his face. That's just what I'm seeing. So he looks like if we're to be, I suppose bluntly honest, he looks like a feminized man. He's got big eyes. He looks like he has eyeshadow nearly around his eyes. And if I were to sort of just imagine that face without stubble, he does look like a woman. That's what I would think, just looking at him. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it depends how much weight you want to place on someone's appearance. Now, obviously, it doesn't tell you everything, and not close to it. So I'm not saying you should base your entire judgment of someone based on how they look. Not at all. However, if this dude looks like a woman to me, and he's giving me cues of femininity, i.e. he's giving me estrogen cues, because in order to look feminine, to have a feminized appearance, that must come from female hormones manipulating the morphology of that person to have them look more feminine. So if this dude looks ladylike, he is a man, but if he looks ladylike, then I would have to, guess that he's got a bit more estrogen than average flowing through that body. Now, just looking at him, based on the notion that he might be a bit feminized, and when we factor in, folks, the basic psychological differences between men and women, this dude looks a little unstable. That's just my first impression. He looks like a woman with stubble, and he looks like a little bit of criticism would send him over the edge. That's what I think whenever I see him. He looks unstable. He looks like the way women, on average, are far more emotional than men. Women are far more likely to be manipulated by emotional arguments. They are far more likely to break down in tears. They are far more likely to allow their emotions to cloud their judgment. He looks like he's a delicate sort, is what I'm trying to say. He looks like a delicate sort. And does this mean he's guilty of anything? Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't mean he's guilty of plagiarism. It doesn't mean he's guilty of exaggerating his claims. But he does look like a bit of an unstable man to me. Whenever I think of highly stable, testosteronized men, they do not look like this. That is not the image of that kind of male that comes to my mind. And so, he looks unstable to me. Now you might say, how the fuck can you deduce all that from a picture of this dude on the BBC website? All I'm doing, folks, is generating a first impression. That's it. As I've already said, it doesn't tell me anywhere close to the whole story, but it does give me some useful information, some useful feedback. And so it feels like Jason Arday is a delicate sort. And this is going to be relevant later, folks, whenever we're talking about the lesson from all of this. But as soon as I opened the article, the first thing I thought was, he looks like a woman. He's given me feminine cues. He looks like he's feminized, if there's such a word. He looks like he has a above average level of estrogen. And that's being reflected in his facial configuration. He looks more female-like, more woman-like. And if he looks more woman-like and he has a bit more estrogen than the average man, then we could make the next logical step, which would be, well, if he's more feminized than the average man, then he probably has more female tendencies in his psychology than the average man. And what are some of the tendencies that females have? Emotional instability. Women are more emotionally unstable than men. So if this dude looks more like a woman and he's giving me estrogen cues, then, I would have to assume that that psychology is going to reflect some shades of a woman's psychology. And if it's going to reflect some shades of a woman's psychology, then he's probably going to have a wee bit more instability than the average man, meaning he's a more agreeable, delicate sort. That is my first impression when I look at Jason Arday. And that's going to be relevant later. Doesn't mean he's guilty, folks, of anything. It just means that's what I think when I look at him. Okay, so we always have to judge our books by their covers, folks. Now, with that out of the road, let's read a bit of this article. Now, we're not going to read the whole thing. Absolutely not. But we're going to read a bit of it. Let's zoom in here. Okay, so we're going to start up here. Let's get into this, folks. Okay, so it says, public figures and friends of Jason Arday have called for a public inquiry into media coverage surrounding the former Cambridge professor before his death. Labour MP Diane Abbott and actress Jamila Jamal, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, are among 30,000 signatories of a letter to the Prime Minister which claims Arday's death followed, quote, 2 weeks of relentless harassment. The letter issued by the group Good Law Project, which had been representing Arday after he stood down from his Cambridge role amid a plagiarism row, said many of its signatories had warned media outlets about the intensity of their reporting. Lord Woolley. What a name. Lord fucking Woolley. That's like something I would make up. But it's actually real, folks. So let's see what Lord Woolley has to say. Lord Woolley, principal of Homerton College at Cambridge. I mean, folks, wouldn't you expect a Lord Woolley to be working at Cambridge? Doesn't that just fit hand in glove? He said Arday had been subjected to a, quote, vicious witch hunt. Okay. It continues. Green Party leader Zach Polanski and Labour MPs Belle Ribeiro Addy, Clive Lewis and Nadia Whittome are among the politicians to have signed the statement, alongside former England footballer Eni Aluko, National Education Union General Secretary Daniel Kebede and broadcaster Carol Vorderman. It calls for, quote, an immediate public inquiry into how to ensure a responsible press. Now, as it said, as we read earlier, it gives a bit of background detail here on Arday. We don't need to really talk about that. But let's get on to what Lord Woolley is saying here. We'll start here at this point. So Lord Woolley told BBC Radio 4's Broadcasting House programme on Sunday he and a number of close friends had met Arday 4 days before he was found dead at a South London address. I'm presuming it was his home, but maybe it wasn't. He said Abbott and social activist Missan Harriman were among those who gathered to offer support, as they had also experienced, quote, horrible media attention. He said Arday felt hounded and the relentless media coverage had been, quote, a blood sport. Diane said to him, she held his hand and said, we will help you get through this, he added. But on that day, we saw a man, half his body weight and desperate beyond belief. What the fuck? Did I read that correctly, folks? But on that day, we saw a man half his body weight and desperate beyond belief. Well, now, but Jesus, I think Lord Woolley might be exaggerating a little bit here. So you're telling me in 2 weeks, Jason Arday lost half his body weight? I know stress, folks, can do funny things, but half his body weight. Maybe he's just, exaggerating a little bit there. I find that a bit hard to believe, losing half your body weight. Folks, the reason why I'm just labouring on this, because, people do 40-day water fasts where they don't eat anything. They just drink water, and they do not lose half their body weight. Fasting for 40 days, drinking fucking water. So, I'd love to know how Jason Arday, has managed to lose half his body weight in 2 weeks since these allegations broke. But anyway, maybe I'm just being picky there. But Lord Woolley seems like he's, added a few bells and whistles onto that. Now, Lord Woolley said issues of plagiarism were constant in academia and that a number of individuals who had been accused of plagiarism had not been subjected to the attention Arday had received. We have to ask this question. We have to talk about it. Lord Woolley's getting serious, folks. Which a lot of people don't want to talk about is racism. You have to look at it negatively. You have to look at negatively differential treatment. All right, so, look. Lord Woolley, he's clearly taking, you know the way I broke people up into different groups earlier? Well, Lord Woolley's clearly in, the camp to the left, where he thinks it's all about racism. Okay. We're going to read these last few bits here, because we don't need to get into all that crap. On August the 6th, Cambridge announced an independent investigation into Arday's appointment, though it is understood the university does not feel it right to decide on whether to proceed with its investigation. Okay. So, folks, you get a gauge now of what this story's all about. You heard from Lord Woolley, the man himself. And there's the article, Calls for Public Inquiry into Jason Arday Witch Hunt. You can go read the whole thing if you want to do it yourself. But we are now going to extract a lesson from this. So let us get the main screen back up here. Let us have a look and see. Alright, so, now that you know what we're dealing with, I'm not going to get into this whole left and right, racism, woke, politics, all of this, diversity politics, black professor, not qualified. Folks, at the end of the day, I don't know if this dude is guilty or not. I don't. I think, there should be an investigation. That probably should happen. And it doesn't matter whether he's dead or not. Just because he, folks, just because, and again, this is me speculating, but just because you top yourself, let's just speculate and say in a fictional world here, in an imaginary scenario, if some dude called, Bob Williams, if Bob Williams was a black professor at Cambridge, and Bob had been subjected to a whole bunch of scrutiny surrounding who he is and who he claims to be, and then Bob decides to just kill himself, well, isn't that a great get-out-of-jail card? What a great get-out-of-jail card. I mean, folks, just because he's dead doesn't mean there shouldn't be an investigation. This university should be holding all of its employees, all of its professors accountable. So, right, is it unfortunate that he died? Well, yeah, it is. I don't think anybody would advocate for people to go around killing themselves, if that is what happened. And that is what is being strongly suggested, although nobody wants to fucking come out and say it for some reason. But the investigation should still continue, because Cambridge University it's an institution. So what, they just get to brush it all under the carpet? What happens if he was a fraud? Let's just say, what happens if Jason Arday was a fraud? Well, if the investigation gets scrapped, well, isn't that very convenient for Lord Woolley and all the rest of them at Cambridge University? Well, that would be very convenient indeed, that they don't have to answer the very logical follow-up question, which would be, how the fuck did you let this dude in here in the first place? Where was your due diligence and background check on Jason Arday? Why did it take a whole bunch of media outlets to find out this stuff before you did an investigation that you should have done fucking years ago? You see, that would be convenient for Cambridge to not run an investigation if, and it's a big if Jason Arday was actually guilty. But the point here, folks, is we don't know if he's guilty or not. So I'm not going to sit here and speculate much more about that, because I have fuck all really to speculate on. It might be true, it might not. They're only allegations. No idea. Don't know the man, I've never talked with the man, I can only look at him and judge the cover of his book. Now, that does, though, bring us into the lesson for our show. Some people might be feeling it's distasteful, the way that I was analysing Jason Arday's cover of his book. In other words, how I was analysing his appearance. But you see, in my opinion, this dude is far more unstable than the average man. That's what he looks like. He looks like an estrogenized male that has more feminine traits, certainly to his facial complexion. He looks like he's a bit feminized, bit too much estrogen going through the system. And he looks like he's a wee bit, I'm not saying he is, he just looks like an unstable man. He doesn't look like a highly testosteronized, disagreeable, narcissistic, get the fuck out of my way man who doesn't give a shit what anybody thinks about him and is hell-bent on doing what he wants to do in this world, independent of all of the varying opinions that are flying around him. No, Jason Arday does not look like that. Jason Arday looks like a delicate soul with some strong feminine energy, we could say. Why is this relevant? Well, folks, you'll see in the thumbnail of our show. What was in the thumbnail? Did anybody pay attention to the thumbnail? Let me remind you of what was in the thumbnail of our show. It was something along the lines of, is it worth it to be a public figure? Can you hack it being a public figure? That's the question that I really want to talk about in the show here. Not the politics, not whether he's guilty or not. I want to talk about this idea of, is it actually worth it to be a public figure? And you know what the answer to the question is? It depends what your personality is. That is what the big factor is that we have to consider. Whether or not it is worth it to be a public figure is highly dependent on your personality's ability to deal with criticism. Because, folks, when you are a public figure, there is one thing that is inevitable. And you know what this one inevitable thing is? You are going to get a bunch of shit thrown your direction. People are going to criticize how you look. People are going to criticize what you say. People are going to criticize who you associate with. People are going to criticize what you do in your spare time. People are going to make a whole bunch of shit up about you and spread rumors about you. Folks, being a public figure comes with many perks, but many drawbacks. And the main drawback is that you get a bunch of shit thrown your way. Half of it's not even true, maybe more. People speculate on your personal life. People speculate on what it is that you're thinking. And of course, some people's speculation can go wildly out of control. Before you know it, you've maybe got vicious rumors circulating about who you are, who you're associating with, and what it is that you're going to do in your life. So look, is it worth it to be a public figure? It depends. Now here's the lesson, folks. Here's the lesson. And I have to be honest here. I have to be a fair man when I'm analysing this. Jason Arday was more than happy. He was more than happy in 2023 to stand before the media, to stand in front of Cambridge University as the youngest black professor in the history of the university. So Jason Arday was more than happy to take all the plaudits that came, all the praise, all of the admiration that was thrown his way. He was more than happy to take all that and bask in all that. But then when the shitstorm comes, which, folks, if you are a public figure, the one inevitable thing about living life as a public figure is that you are going to have to deal with multiple shitstorms throughout your life as a public figure. And isn't it funny in a way, folks? Isn't it funny that when the first true shitstorm comes the direction of Jason Arday, he ends up dead? Was Jason Arday cut out to be a public figure? Clearly not. Clearly not. You heard what Lord Woolley had to say. You heard what Diane Abbott had to say when she was holding his hand, telling him he's going to get through this. Like I don't want to be, tactless here, folks, but like, Like, folks, I mean, let's be honest here. I'm speaking from the perspective of a man. Imagine some woman, if you're a man, imagine you're a man. If you're a man, imagine some woman holding your hand, telling you that it's all going to be okay, and petting you and saying it's fine, we're going to get you through it. Fuck me, folks. Like, I mean, that sounds like a man who has a lot of feminine energy coursing through that body. A bit too much estrogen. If you, as a man, ever need to have your hand held by another woman who's then going to tell you that it's all going to be okay, it's going to be fine, you clearly were not cut out to be a public figure. Very obviously. You do not have the psychology to be a public figure because you do not have the ability to deal with the inevitable shitstorm and criticism that's going to come your way. And this is the thing I learned from this story, folks. And it's something you can learn as well. We all need to do a deep reflection on our own psychology whenever we are thinking about doing anything publicly. I don't care whether it's playing sport, fucking getting up on stage and singing a song and playing the guitar, going and giving a speech. Doesn't matter what it is. If you are going to do something in public, you need to ask yourself, can I deal with the criticism that's going to come my way? Folks, let me tell you something. I play music. And you see, whenever I play music, this is how I dress. So whenever I'm up playing the guitar, when I'm up singing, I dress like this. Now, do you think I get criticized for how I look and how I sound and what I say on the microphone? Of course I do. People make snide remarks all the time. People make jokes about how I look. People are constantly trying to take status away from me. So you might then ask, well, why do you continue to dress that way when you're out in public performing music? Well, let me tell you why. Because the number of critics are vastly outweighed by the number of people who actually enjoy my musical performances. And it's the same with anything in life, folks. There's normally only a very small amount of people. Now, they are very vocal. They are a very vocal minority of critics. But nonetheless, they're a small number of people. The vast majority of people are not going to be out there, criticizing you, spreading rumors about you, talking shit about you. Most people, even if they don't like what you have to offer, they won't really do much. They won't really go out of their way to do anything. So there will be a small vocal minority that will give you a pile of shit. And whenever I go out to play music, there's always a few people. There are always a few people who will make, remarks about how I look, how I sound, my performance style, what my fucking guitar playing's like. I mean, people are always going to criticize you when you do stuff out in public. It's inevitable. Now, why do I continue to do it? Because my personality, folks, you must understand, my personality is well able to deal with the shitstorm. Well able to deal with it. So you're not going to see me, mental health, I'm depressed because fucking such and such made some remark about how I look. Normally the people who criticize me are fucking retards. They're fat, obese, wrinkly, disgusting looking humans. In fact, for me, I take the criticism as the ultimate compliment. I've managed to get them to invest precious time, energy, and attention in me. So I've managed to literally get them to stop and channel their energy, their energetic flow towards me. Fantastic. But you see, this is the thing, folks. You need to ask yourself, if you're going to do something in public, Can you deal with it the way I can deal with it? I'm not going to get depressed. Folks, throughout my life as a whole, we've all done many things in our lives. If I were to stick on the example of music, I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've went up on the stage and, not sounded good. I've given my best effort, but, it didn't sound good. And, people criticize you. People talk about you behind your back. They say that, he was shit. He sounded terrible. He's an idiot. Look how he dresses. Dipshit up on the stage, dancing around there as if he is something. I've got a lot of criticism and a lot of kudos and praise from people over the years in the sphere of music. Okay. You see, what won't happen to me is I'm not going to allow the criticism to adversely affect fucking, quote, my mental health. No, I'll take the criticism, I'll analyze it, I may agree with it, I may disagree with it, and then I horse on. I keep going. I keep putting the work in, I keep giving my best every time I go up to perform, and then as more praise and criticism comes my direction, I deal with it appropriately. But folks, I have a personality that allows me to do that. I have a personality that allows me to absorb both the praise and the negative criticism and integrate it into my analysis without it causing great emotional turmoil and causing me to lock myself in my room for a week. No. That ain't gonna happen with me. So I am cut out to be, quote, a public figure. I am cut out to do things in public. What am I doing right now? I'm on a live stream, dressed as the Bandido. Do you not think people are going to leave comments on the channel, which they do, criticizing what I say and how I look? Of course they do. Normal and natural. Because when you do things in public, folks, you have to accept the rough with the smooth. Sure, does everybody want to be on the receiving end of praise and other people's admiration? Obviously. Who doesn't want to get praised genuinely for what they're doing? For the value that they're offering to the world? Everybody loves a bit of praise. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're doing something valuable for people. It helps your confidence rise, which in turn is going to improve your performance at whatever it is you're doing. But, folks, be under no illusions. This is the lesson. Be under no illusions. When you do something publicly, whether it's in the real world or online, because when you upload yourself, a video of yourself, a live stream, whatever it is, when you upload content of yourself, or if you upload your art, or whatever it is online, you're now doing something public. You're now a public figure, whether you like it or not. And what we all need to ask ourselves is, do we have the personalities to be able to deal with the nasty comments, the criticism that's going to be negative, that's going to be funneled our direction? Now, Jason Arday, folks, this dude was more than happy to take the plaudits, to take the praise in 2023. But when the going got tough, what did he do? He crawled back into his tortoise shell and fucking his mental health in inverted commas, his mental health was in turmoil. He was a mess, in other words. He couldn't deal with the criticism. Now, I know the BBC and a whole bunch of people are going to say, but it was unfair treatment by the media. Right, well then, you shouldn't be a public figure. That's the simple answer to that. Jason Arday, you see, if Jason Arday cannot hack being a public figure, he should never have been a Cambridge professor. And you know why he should never have been a Cambridge professor? Because by being a young black professor, he was always going to be put out into the public spotlight, and he was always going to become a public figure. So I don't know what delusional land Jason Arday was living in, but he was always going to be subjected to criticism. But you see, when everything was going well, when it was all, as Rocky would say, when it was all sunshine and rainbows, he had no problem being a Cambridge professor. But when the shitstorm came, he buckled. He buckled under the pressure, under the scrutiny, which tells me that he should never have been there in the first place. Now you may say to me, what do you expect him to do? He's got this brilliant role as Cambridge professor. What do you mean, what do I expect him to do? If you can't hack public life as a public figure, you shouldn't be there, because you're going to end up dead. In all probability. Because if you are unstable psychologically, if you are a delicate, agreeable sort, then the criticism is going to drive you into a deeper and deeper well of depression. And folks, there's only so much an unstable, depressed mind can take before it fucking takes action and removes itself from the planet. So you know what you need to be asking yourselves, folks? You need to be looking at this article, at this story with Jason Arday. And the lesson here that we all need to be asking ourselves this. We all need to be saying, okay, if I'm going to do something in public, let me make sure I'm not under any false illusions here. Because you'll hear parents. Parents are great for this. Fucking dipshits, a whole pile of them. Parents are great for telling their children, get up on stage. Get up on stage and sing a song. Go out onto the pitch and play the match. Get up here and do this. Go and do that. Go in front of the camera and, hold up your certificate with your A levels and your GCSEs. Folks, be careful. Because you see, if you're pushing your children to do that, you are making your children public figures. Please realize that. You're making them public figures, which means you are making them a target for both praise and negative criticism. You can't have one without the other, parents of the world. And you see, even, let's just remove the parents. People in general, you watching this, you must understand, you can't just have the praise. It's not how life works. You will be praised at times, but the praise is also going to come with a side order of shit. So you'll be sitting at the restaurant table, eating your big fucking juicy T-bone steak, and you know what'll happen? You see, just at the other side of the table, there'll be a wee bowl of shit there. Now, if you're a public figure, you have to get used to eating your T-bone steak with a bowl of shit nearby. You have to get used to doing that. You have to become comfortable eating your T-bone steak when there's a bowl of shit a few feet away, and it stinks, and it's smelly. And you see, if you don't want to have a bowl of shit at the same table where you're eating your T-bone steak, then you need to stop being a public figure. You need to stop doing things in public. That'll take the bowl of shit away. But you see, is that what people want to do? No. Whether it's in the real world or the online world, everybody's chasing clout. Everybody's chasing status. Everybody's at it. And what I would say to you, and this actually ties in very nicely to our last episode about the fucking tourists out in Peru. I would encourage you to watch that one. We talk all about status in that episode. If you are pursuing status and clout, which, by the way, folks, when you're a public figure and you're doing things in public, that's going to lead, probability-wise, to an increase in your status and an increase in your clout among your local community and beyond. So yeah, there are some perks. There are some very enticing and worthwhile benefits to being a public figure and to just broadly doing things in public. Absolutely. But don't be a dipshit. Don't be an ignorant dipshit. You are going to get criticized. It's going to happen. And you need to ask yourself now, looking at Jason Arday, use Jason Arday as your fucking textbook example of this. Jason Arday was riding the crest of the wave back in 2023. Youngest ever black professor. You know, he would have been getting praised. You see these same media outlets that are now being accused of a witch hunt and institutional murder, all this shit. Those same media outlets were praising him, probably, back in 2023, giving him a whole bunch of credit. Youngest ever black professor at Cambridge. Yeah, well, he didn't have any problem staying on as professor at Cambridge University. Of course he didn't. I bet you he didn't have any problem with that, because he's getting all the praise. Everybody's saying how great he is, how wonderful a human he is. And the moment the bowl of shit, it's not even at his table yet, but the moment the bowl of shit is being taken on the waiter's tray towards his table, he's already buckling. He steps down as professor of Cambridge University. Why would you do that? Why would you do that if you're not guilty? And I'm not saying that's an indictment of his guilt, but like, if someone makes an allegation about me, I am not going to stop doing what I'm doing until there's a fucking concluded investigation that says that I'm now under investigation for something serious. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. Why would I let someone's allegation, which mightn't even be true, dictate what I'm going to do in the here and now? You know, Jason Arday buckled at the first sign of scrutiny, the first sign of criticism. He's gone. He should never have been there in the first place. But you see, he was seduced, like a great many other people in this world. He was seduced by the status of his position as the youngest black professor in the history of Cambridge University. He was completely and utterly seduced by all the status and praise that he was going to get by taking up this role. But you know what Jason Arday didn't seem to factor into his analysis? Oh yeah, what happens when the praise dries up for a while and the scrutiny comes? Can I deal with this? Is my personality cut out to deal with this? And this is what I mean, folks. Women are far more likely to buckle under intense scrutiny and negative criticism. We all know this. Why? Why are women more likely than men to buckle under intense scrutiny and negative criticism? Well, two main reasons. Number one, they are more emotionally unstable than men. Women are more unstable, more instability in their psychology. Their life is more of an emotional roller coaster. Men are more constant. They don't have as many peaks and troughs throughout the day. Women are far more emotional on average than men. And this is good, because the women are supposed to be rearing the children. And believe me, it's very useful to have a bit of instability in your personality if you're having to deal with fucking 6-month-old children who piss and shit their nappies all the time. Fuck me. I was going to say diapers, but I have to remember, I'm not in the United States of America. You know, nappies, diapers. I mean, if you're a woman, you would want a bit of instability. You would want to be able to ride the emotional roller coaster that your 6-month-old child is experiencing. So this instability, it's not that it's a bad thing at all. It's very useful for women to be able to deal with their children at their level. Like, folks, fuck me. You see, if you put a 1-year-old child in front of me, could I think of anything worse? Having to interact with this blob of goo that pisses and shits its nappy all day. No, I don't have enough instability in my psychology. I cannot relate to that thing. That thing is not useful to me. It's a blob of goo. It can't even speak. It just mutters noises. But if you're a woman with more instability in her psychology than me, then you're able to better relate to a 1-year-old child that's talking gobbledygook and can barely walk. Yeah, that's a useful trait to have. But when you mix a woman's instability, because remember, what does instability lead to, folks? Emotional instability leads to the emotions clouding one's judgment. This is why women are so good with their children, because they allow their emotionality to basically inject itself into their interactions with their children. They're able to go to their children. I can't do that. I just look at the child and it irritates me. Children irritate me. Just looking at them. They're so fucking useless. But I'm too stable. I've got too much emotional stability. I can't ride the wave of the emotional roller coaster that would allow me to deal with a 6-month-old child or a 1-year-old child. But women can. Women can allow their emotions to enter into their behavior and in the way in which they interact with their children. And this allows them to spend fuck tons of time with otherwise completely useless blobs of goo that we call children. Okay. However, the problem is, folks, that may be all well and good for raising a child. But what happens if you start to come under immense public scrutiny as a woman or as a man who's a delicate sort with a lot of feminine energy coursing through his veins? What's the problem if you're a more unstable person? And better still, what happens if not only are you unstable emotionally, but you're a very agreeable person? What is an agreeable person? An agreeable person is what we colloquially call a people pleaser. Listen to that, folks. If you are agreeable, you are a people pleaser. One of your top priorities in this life is making sure that everybody around you is happy and not pissed off at you. If you're an agreeable person, you want to make sure that all the people around you are seeing you in a favorable light. You want to make sure that you're pleasing everybody. You want to make sure that you're meeting their demands. You want to make sure that you're not in their bad books, because you wouldn't want to be labelled as someone who's not good enough according to their own criteria. No. Agreeable people really want to satisfy the wishes and demands of other people so that other people then look favourably upon them as nice, easygoing, amenable people who are going to do what they're told. Not going to cause any trouble. Now, folks, if you pair these two traits, emotional instability with a lot of agreeability, this is a disaster. An absolute disaster when it comes to public scrutiny. If you're already emotionally unstable and your life is an emotional fucking roller coaster, what do you think's going to happen when a whole bunch of people in public start to criticize you and scrutinize what it is you're doing? Well, your emotionality is going to start to wrestle control of your psychology. And all of a sudden, you're going to start taking a whole bunch of decisions from a very emotional space. In other words, your decision making and your overall worldview becomes clouded by your own emotions. You're more likely to leak your emotions when you're unstable. And then if we factor into the equation that you're really agreeable, you're a people pleaser, then what are you going to want to do? You're going to want to please these people who are criticizing you. This is going to drive you doolally. If you start to get feedback from the world that people don't like who you are, or that people are spreading rumors about you, people are saying things about you that aren't true, if you are an unstable, agreeable person, this is going to drive you to fucking insanity. It's going to drive you doolally. And the argument that I would make here is that Jason Arday is an unstable, agreeable, delicate man. That's what I mean whenever I was talking about analysing his appearance at the beginning of the show or at the beginning of the article. Remember, I went down and analysed the cover of his book. In other words, I analysed what he looks like. What did I say? He looks like a feminized, highly estrogenized male with a lot of, female energy flowing through him. That's what his face is suggesting to me. And so if he looks woman-like, if he looks quite feminine, then there's a good chance that his psychology is going to reflect some female traits that we're seeing in his physical appearance. And what are the classic traits of a female's psychology? Emotional instability and agreeableness. Folks, if you are an emotionally unstable person who is a people pleaser, I would say that you are running a big risk doing things in public. Because that blend of personality traits is a fucking disaster for dealing with criticism. Me, I'm more emotionally stable, and I'm also disagreeable. So it shouldn't be a surprise. Me being a more emotionally stable, level-headed person who doesn't allow his emotions, more often than not, to cloud his judgment, not only am I more emotionally stable, but I'm disagreeable. Meaning, I'm not trying to please people. I'm not a people pleaser. It doesn't matter to me if there's a whole bunch of people criticizing what it is I'm doing. If I want to do that thing, I will keep fucking doing it. I don't care. It's not gonna stop me doing what I'm doing. It's not gonna get me down in the dumps. It's not gonna get me depressed. It's not gonna affect my mental health. No, I will not need to go and get my mental health disability benefits. No. But I'm more emotionally stable and more disagreeable. So folks, the lesson here is, if you watching this, if you are an emotionally unstable person, how do you know if you are an emotionally unstable person? A good way to suss this out is figure out how excited you get when things are going well, and figure out how depressed you get when things aren't going well. So, whenever things are going well in your life, do you get really excited and go, oh, great, yes, oh, I got 3 A's in my A-levels, fantastic, oh, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to go to Cambridge University, this is great. Do you get really excited whenever good things happen in your life? And you see, if you get fucking 2 B's and a C in your A-levels, you see, if you spend the next week in your bedroom bawling your eyes out and not going out into public, well then that is telling you that you are an emotionally unstable person. Whether you like it or not, your emotional landscape is like a fucking roller coaster. Whenever things are going well, you get very excited. Whenever things are not going so well, you get very down in the dumps and very depressed. Folks, if you are operating at the extremes of the emotional spectrum, that means you are unstable. Now, take myself as an example. When my fucking A-levels came in, what do you think my response was? Right, okay, piece of paper, okay, great. Right, can I go out and do something else now? In other words, I actually remember. Whenever I had my A-levels, there was this thing that happened whereby the results, usually you have to go into your school to get your results. But there was this thing that you could sign up to online where you could get your results something like, like 12 or 24 hours early. So normally you go into school, you get your little fucking envelope with your piece of paper with fucking letters on it. That's normally what you do. But at the time of my A-levels, there was this thing introduced where you could pay some fee to get your results early. Do you think I did this? No, I did not. I went into school, I got my envelope, I looked at what I got and said, right, okay, let's get on with the rest of the day now. In other words, I didn't get overly excited by my results. It didn't matter. I just looked at the results and said, right, that's over, don't have to study anymore, I'm gonna go do something else now for the rest of the day. I wasn't excited. I also wasn't down in the dumps either. Just neutral, stable. It's like, right, there are results, okay. Job done. Let's get on with the rest of the day. I've had to come into fucking school here, pick these things up, right, okay. Fine, I'll talk to a few people, no problem. Now I'm going home. And I'm not really going to think about them much more. Unstable people get very excited and very depressed. They operate at the extreme ends of the emotional spectrum. If that is you, that means you are emotionally unstable. Likewise, how do you know if you're agreeable? Well, you are agreeable if you are constantly worrying about what other people are thinking about what it is that you're doing. If you are constantly trying to please other people, to satisfy their wishes and demands, make sure they are catered for first before catering for yourself, you are agreeable. Because you're literally willing to sacrifice your own interests and goals to satisfy theirs just so that they give you their approval. If that is you, then that means you are agreeable. Take myself again as an example. If I'm up on stage, and this has happened, I've had a couple of people say to me, when I'm up on stage playing music, they'll say, why do you dress that way? You shouldn't dress that way. I wouldn't dress that way, that's just, I don't know why you're dressing with, the silver chain and stuff like that and the sunglasses, that's very pretentious. I do not care. I like dressing this way. I'm only interested in pleasing myself. So these people were all like, oh, I'm not so sure about the sunglasses inside. You're sort of prancing around there like a pretentious git, Don't care. Now, you see, if I was a people pleaser, you know what I would do? I would say, oh, I better take the sunglasses off then. Fat Freddy. Fat Freddy at the bottom of the stage. Fat Freddy said, you're a pretentious git. And you see, if I was agreeable, I would say, but Jesus me. Fat Freddy said, I'm a pretentious git. I better take off the sunglasses. Well, you see, I don't give a fuck about Fat Freddy. Fat Freddy is fat, and he's a mess. And I like wearing sunglasses when I'm playing music. But you see, I'm disagreeable. I have no problem basking in the discomfort with disagreeing with someone and not honouring their wishes and demands. No problem. I will stand there, stony-faced, if I have to, and bask in the disagreeable atmosphere of the moment. No problem. If I want to do something and somebody else thinks it's a big problem, if it means enough to me, if it's something that's not breaking the law, if it's something that's not, involved in harassing other people or abusing other people verbally, I'm going to continue to do it if I want to do it. Because I'm disagreeable and I look after number one, first and foremost. I look after what I want to do, not what other people want me to do. So from this show, folks, what I would encourage anybody watching to do is to really analyze your own personality, specifically from the perspective of these two traits. Are you emotionally unstable? Are you a people pleaser, agreeable person? Because if you are one or both of those things, you should be thinking hard before you start becoming a public figure or before you start doing things in public. You really should, because you need to realize when you go out into public and you put yourself in front of people, it doesn't matter how well you speak, how good you look, there will always be people throwing shit at you. And so you need to have a titanium mind. You need to be built to be able to deal with that. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is you are going to be living your life in a very emotionally turbulent state. You're going to get down in the dumps. You're going to get depressed. That's going to happen. Some people can deal with negative criticism better than others. We all know this, folks. If you can't deal well with negative criticism, that must mean that you're in some way emotionally unstable and you're in some way agreeable. Because it is those two traits, folks, that by and large, now there are other things as well. Conscientiousness plays a role, no question. You know, how introverted or extroverted you are, we could bring in other personality traits as well. But specifically, folks, just to keep the show simple here, so that we're not going into a big fucking, biological discussion here about personality. If you are emotionally unstable, and if you are agreeable, we've already explained how to suss out if you are one or both of these things. If you are one or both of these things, I would say, put the brakes on and think long and hard before you go out into public and do things. Think long and hard. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that the upside would want to be pretty fucking big. If you're an agreeable, emotionally unstable person, the upside to you getting up there in public and doing stuff would want to be pretty big, because you're going to be in an emotionally turbulent state when you're doing this. Because you're going to get criticized. That's going to happen. There's no such thing, folks, as 100% praise for a public figure. It never happens. Doesn't matter who you are. There are too many different personalities out here in the world. There's such a diversity among humans. Some people are going to love what you do. Some people are going to hate what you do. Some people are going to be in the middle. They're not fussed either way. But if you can't hack the criticism, you shouldn't be out there. Jason Arday could not hack the criticism. And folks, to be quite honest with you, almost by looking at the man, that's what I mean, judging the book of the cover. Almost by looking at him, I could almost tell that he was a delicate sort. I just by his appearance alone, he looks like someone who is, a gentle soul, who wouldn't deal well with, any significant amount of criticism. Look at me by comparison. Look at the way I'm dressing. There's a fucking, there's a bluntness to me. I come on with my red bandana, with my sunglasses indoors, which really pisses people off. I'm here in the tank top with a chain. You can tell immediately by within about 30 seconds of looking at me and listening to me, you can tell that I'm disagreeable. You can just tell, because who else would dress this way? You would only dress this way if you are somewhat insulated against criticism. Because if you dress like me and you talk like me, you are going to get criticized. So that it immediately tells you, just by looking at me, you can tell, yeah, he's a bit of a disagreeable schmuck. He must be, to dress that way. And then this is the thing. When you bring in the emotional stability, because I'm pretty emotionally stable, it means my emotional landscape is not a roller coaster. It's more like this. That's my emotional landscape. I only fluctuate up and down a little bit from the center line. That's the way of my life. That's where I live my life. You don't see me up here. You don't see me down here. I don't get super excited. I don't get super down and depressed. I'm just here. Up and down a little. That's it. And then when you throw into the equation that I'm disagreeable, I have no problem being a public figure. I ain't going to get depressed. My mental health isn't going to be affected. No. But Jason Arday, he wasn't He didn't have the personality for that. So he should never have been a public figure. And what we can learn from this is, if you are starting to notice certain traits in your own psychology, you should be paying attention to those. Because you're going to have parents telling you, you're going to have friends telling you, you're going to have colleagues telling you, go up and do that thing, go and say this, do this video online. You're going to have people telling you to do things in life. And you need to ask yourself, well, are these things going to make me a public figure? Are these things going to be put out into the public for scrutiny? And you then need to say, well, hold on. Am I comfortable with this? Because if I allow myself to be constantly put in public positions of scrutiny, this is going to make my life miserable if I'm an unstable person who's a people pleaser and agreeable. That's not good for your life satisfaction. So you need to pay attention to your own psychology. I understand my psychology. I know what my psychology is. So I play to my strengths. That's fine for me. That may not be fine for you. As I've already said, there's no... Being disagreeable and emotionally stable isn't better than being emotionally unstable and agreeable. It depends what you're looking to do. What did I say earlier? I am shit with infants. Don't you be bringing your infants around to me. I've no interest in them. I'm not going to be able to relate to a 6-month-old child. Can't do it. It's not in me. You know, whenever that child becomes, 22 years of age and it's actually fucking useful to me, yeah, I'll interact with it then. But I'm not interacting with it when it's a blob of goo, pissing and shitting itself, crawling all over the floor, mumbling a whole bunch of nonsense. No. So my personality is not very well, suited to children. Certainly infants. It just isn't, because they piss me off. But my personality is very well suited to being a public figure and to doing things in public, like playing music, talking in public on a live stream. Perfectly good for me. You need to analyze. Jason Arday didn't do this. He didn't run this analysis. He was happy to take the praise back in 2023. Youngest ever black professor. But you see, he didn't factor in the shitstorm that was inevitably going to come by him turning into a public figure. You can learn from this, so can I. And don't allow people, folks, to strong arm you into doing things in public that you don't want to do. That's only going to make your life miserable. This other person who's trying to strong arm you into doing a video for social media, into giving a speech, into fucking singing a song up at the open mic night, fuck them. That's them trying to impose their will on you. Fuck them. Tell them to piss off or just ignore them. Because that's them wanting you to do something for their fucking benefit. And they don't give a shit if you suffer, by and large. Because if they give a shit, they wouldn't be telling you to do it in the first place. So don't allow people to manipulate you in that way. Get you to put yourself into a position similar to Jason Arday. Because all that's going to do is, it's just going to make your life a misery. You don't have the psychology for it. So if you don't have the psychology for it, you shouldn't be in a public position that's going to be inevitably scrutinized. Okay, so folks, that's the end of the show. That draws our show to a close. An interesting story indeed. As you can hear, we haven't really talked about the politics of it. Who cares? We don't have enough information. We can speculate, yeah. Everybody does that. We don't want to be aligning, I'm left wing, I'm right wing, that's my grip. No. We want to look at these stories, folks, and get useful stuff out of it for ourselves. That's it. Leave all the rest of the nonsense talk for everybody else. Anyway, so that draws our show to a close. Again, folks, I would encourage you, feel free to give the show a thumbs up, Don't be afraid to give it a thumbs down, because remember, folks, ultimately, it ain't gonna affect the Bandido one way or the other. It ain't gonna, send him down into the deep well of despair. So, you have the option. Give it a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down. Again, feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts and insights, whether you agree or disagree with what it is that we're talking about. And then finally, folks, feel free to join the page via your subscription. Subscribe to Bandido Talks here on YouTube. Only if you find what we do here useful, valuable, interesting, or insightful in some way. Feel free to subscribe here on YouTube. Folks, use the scrolling black banner below. We did a show a few days ago over on Rumble. If you're sort of thinking to yourself, Mr. Bandido, do you only do live shows on YouTube? No. We do live shows over on Rumble as well. Now, you see this scrolling black banner that's coming up? You're going to see a little web address that takes you over to Bandido Talks on Rumble. Type that into your browser, and we've got almost 50 live shows over on Rumble. Completely different live shows. Completely different content. More political, more US-based stories. That's over on Rumble. We did a show a few days ago. What were we talking about a few days ago? What the fuck were we talking about over on Rumble? Let me see here. What were we talking about over on Rumble? Let me have a look. Oh, the Bandido's memory, folks. Hunter Biden. Of course we were talking about old Hunter. That is right. Folks, if Hunter Biden is up your street, that is what we were talking about over on Rumble. I was thinking about Nicaragua. I was thinking about that live show and the Romanian elections. Those are the ones that are still in my head. But we talked about those too. Loads of political stuff over there, folks. And if you want to learn a bit about Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, the old idea of the presidential pardon, just head over to Rumble. Loads of live content over there that you may not have seen if you're only following us here on YouTube. And then finally, folks, second last thing, you can follow over on X as well. You can see scrolling black banner. That'll be coming up soon. Follow over on X. We can notify you of any upcoming live shows over there. And then finally, folks, we're gonna get there. Holy fuck. The scrolling red banner up above, you will see an email address. That email address is matteo@inspirit.uk. If you want to get in contact with the Bandido, if you want to give him some feedback, drop him a question, let him know what you're thinking. Folks, maybe you have a situation in your own life that you need an independent, unbiased third party to weigh in on. Run your situation by the Bandido, throw him an email, and then we take it from there, folks. Easy peasy. Folks, that is everything from me this Thursday afternoon. You enjoy the rest of your day. And with all of that said, it is over and out. This Thursday here on YouTube, live from the Bandido.